right, welcome. Welcome this afternoon to our, I don't remember the session title. I should know this as the moderator of this particular talk, but it's something about lessons learned during a global pandemic locally to Colorado. So we're welcome everybody who's here, both in person and online. I know that I heard that the online technology does not have the ability to answer, put questions right now. So if you want to text me questions, if you're at home online, you're welcome to do that. I have that on my computer here, so I'll be kind of looking for said questions. And my cell phone number is 720-635-3393. If my spam increases, I'll know it was you. I'm already potentially spammed out. But again, that's 720-635-3393. And I just thought I'd start the afternoon by introducing each person, or I'm going to have them introduce themselves. I know that we're all seasoned event planners, but we're just going to talk through some of the things we've learned during this calendar year, which is certainly a lot for all of us, I think. So just to start, since I'm already talking, Stephen Stokes with the city of Northglenn, and we've been doing events. Basically, we stopped just March and April, and then we've been doing events monthly or more since that time, inside of the requirements of the time.
Hello, I am Amy Porter. I am with the city of Brighton. I'm their special events lead. I've been with the city for almost 5 years, and this is certainly new territory for us as well as everybody else. We have been successful in having about 2 of our largest events that my specific office does, and that includes the 4th of July fireworks, and then also our Flicks and Kicks series, which is our movies and concerts in the park. We do have other offices within the city that have done different versions of their events as well. I'll probably mostly speak to the ones that my office has done.
My name is Krista DeHerrera. I'm with Colorado Mountain News Media, and I run the events division for 7 counties in the northern half of Colorado. I particularly work for all of those newspapers, so the Aspen Times, Summit Daily, Vail Daily, Craig Press, Steamboat, Pilot, and Today, etc. And we've had to postpone a few things. We've had to reimagine some of our events and projects, and then we went hybrid on a couple of events, and then we did do one major live event, which was the Steamboat Hot Air Balloon Festival, but we had to kind of reimagine how the public engaged in that event. So we've kind of had a combination of things. We do a lot of non-traditional type events, so we do builder projects and art kind of project type events as well, and so we're able to execute those actually even more successfully this year in a pandemic because everybody was home building stuff.
Hi, my name is Renee Ortiz. The company is Eventful Productions, and I've been working in the events business for about 20 years, and so this was not the way that I thought my career would go, where you wake up one day and it's suddenly illegal to do your job. So we are involved in a number of the city of Denver's largest festivals, which of course none of those took place. So Denver Chalk Art Festival, Cinco de Mayo, Cherry Creek Arts Festival, none of those took place. But we have been able to work with our nonprofit clients on some of our gala fundraisers. We did a virtual 5K. The Sunnyside Music Festival, we did a little hybrid with that particular project. And then also we've been working with the city of Denver to support their COVID testing and putting our experience to work with infrastructure and ingress, egress, and all of those little pieces of the pie.
And so for all, just maybe by a show of hands, who has done virtual events as part of? So a couple of us. Okay, great.
One of the offices of the city, not my particular office, but they are doing their art in the park virtually.
Okay, great. So I think that just in terms of if you're watching online or if you have questions in the audience, we can speak both to in-person events and virtual events as a part of the conversation. And I know we have done virtual portions, and I would say we've been much more successful with all of our in-person quality programming than our virtual programming, and probably just part of how we set it up and marketed it. But I'll be interested, just even for myself, if I was to get something from this today, it's, how can we be better at the virtual programming? And if you were with us yesterday, John White from the center talking about Pride did a really good job of saying what they did from a virtual perspective, and it kind of gave me a new thought on life about whether virtual is possible. We had some pre-designed questions that I'm going to read from, but are there any questions in the room? Anybody from the room that had questions about just in general to get us started? No pressure. All right. The first question here that's listed is, what are the things to consider when deciding to host an event during the pandemic? And obviously that's kind of a wide question, but what are some just things that you put into consideration? And, we can either go down the line or somebody has a burning desire to answer.
Well, I mean, obviously the easiest, the most obvious is what the state and local governance is saying and what the rules are. But then I think you also have to put into that who your customer is, who your attendees are, and whether or not they're going to feel comfortable, feel safe, attending the event. So there were certain things that we could have gone through, under the 50-person max capacity, but with an audience that we knew were possibly in the higher risk category. So it's taking all of that into consideration, and also the cost benefit. It's very hard to make any profit at all in a reduced footprint, but sometimes people are still willing to go ahead and produce things just to be more mission focused versus financially driven. So it's all those different ingredients that go into figuring out what to do.
I'll toss in. So the one event that we ended up doing live, the Steamboat Balloon Festival, we started out with several different iterations. I actually had Tim kind of involved in some of it, and I had Ira involved in some of it, and we went through revision after revision after revision, and I got asked to be on committee after committee after committee on what do we do? And I think for me, one of the most frustrating parts about that planning process was not so much the work. I don't mind the work, because to me it's education. But what was frustrating was that you couldn't find anybody that could make decisions. Do you know what I mean? I mean, we were having a hard time because I personally work in 7 different counties with 7 different county commissioners, with sets of county commissioners with 7 different health departments, and every county is completely different. I mean, Routt County sits right next to Moffat County, and Moffat County doesn't believe in masks, and they're doing their thing. You know what I mean? They're like, yeah, whatever. And then Routt County is more of a resort community, so they're much more concerned about gathering sizes, but yet they didn't have a health department. So that was our struggle, was really trying to get guidance. So we were having to sort of self-guide. So we created all these committees, particularly up in Routt County, where we sat and we started talking about, okay, so we had someone who was in touch with the state and the governor, and what is the governor saying today? Mm-hmm. And then what's he gonna say tomorrow, and then the next day, and the next day? But then you have other people that were running other different kinds of events in different counties and saying, okay, well, their numbers just spiked. We're kind of right behind them, so what did they do? So then we were sort of following suit. When do you apply for a variance? When do you not apply for a variance? That was a whole new education. I mean, you're taking a massive event with wind and weather and air meet insurance and all the other things, but then you're adding that kind of like new education into it. That was probably the hardest part, I think. You're entering into the unknown of the unknown.
Sure. Amy?
See, and this is what's so interesting about, we all do events, right? But then we are in either private or different organizations. So coming from a local municipality, we do have those levels of decisions, so to speak. So we do have a safety management coordinator, Stephanie Hackett, who worked very, very closely with the Colorado Department of Health. We are part of Tri-County Health Department. And so a lot of those decisions that they were making then came down to our city council. Our city council had a bigger part in deciding if we were going to be able to hold our events this summer than they normally would have. And so we mostly have been taking direction from them. And so we did get the green light to do our Flicks and Kicks, the movies and concerts in the park. So just logistically, what that looks like for us, we're not concerned, right, about making a profit because that's all grant money that we use from SCFD to put that series on. So then it just comes down to logistics of how are we going to limit people in the park? Like, it's a park, right? How do you do that? So we had to create an event space. We borrowed a striper machine from our rec team out at the baseball fields and physically striped what looked like a giant checkerboard on the grass. That was about 90 feet by 90 feet. It had 10 feet by 10 feet spaces for people to sit in, and then we had to create some rules and regulations around that. How many people can you have in there? They have to be from the same household. And then we had to further restrict that to, registration only by Eventbrite. So each week, the Friday after the event, our events are on Thursday nights. Each Friday event, the link goes up at 10 a.m., just like a Ticketmaster would or something like that. You can register for that event, and we would only allow 35 spaces for the event. So then once they show up, making sure they have masks, that we have hand sanitizer available, and things like that. So just different, right? Some of those same aspects, but just a little bit different. Getting our decisions from somebody else, but then once we have that green light, to either go for it and just change it a little bit. Our 4th of July show, we were able to still have fireworks, but obviously not the party and gathering in the park with the band and the vendors like we normally would have. We had to change the shoot location, which proved to be a challenge, but we made it happen. And somehow keeping that a secret until the night of the event and just giving them a general area. And so it actually all worked out really well. And, that goes out to all, not just the special events department, but to our marketing department and to our public works department. Our streets department had to go out there and plow down this new field that we were going to have a shoot site at. So takes a lot of extra work and a lot of extra care and considerations to create some of these new versions of these events.
Thank you. Thanks for everybody for that. And I'll just add to, from the city of Northglenn, I'm also in a city perspective, so less concerned about revenue and more interested in, how can we create, good partnerships and good opportunities for the citizens that live in our community. And I was blessed, I think, with a boss who is very much focused on, and she was one to very early on say, I think this will be done by June, and like we all hoped. And so, it was kind of like, I'm not going to cancel the whole year. Let's just look from 6 weeks out for every event. So basically, on the day we start marketing event, what can we do in advance, and what do we need to do to have the event happen? And so basically, we were making calls within 2 weeks, within a week or two of that 6 week period, on whether we were going to run the event or not. And I would just say, generally, from what I've learned this summer, is it was definitely easier both for like our team and also I think for citizens as a whole to transition your mind from saying our Pirate Festival, which we'd hold in September and has 20,000 attendees, is now a drive-in movie and drive-in concert with 175 max. That was a harder sell than Grab and Go, which is an event we started this summer using food trucks in local parks with music. And I think for me, what I learned over and over the summer is that it's hard especially when so many other things are getting canceled and life is being shifted in such magnificent ways from what we know to what we don't know. Anything that was changing something we've already done and trying to make it totally different was actually a harder sell than creating something new and then just, marketing and maintaining that event. And so, I don't know what will happen as we move forward, but there is just some advantage almost to creating something new. So then you're not shifting perspectives, you're creating new opportunities for citizens and for attendees. So that was like, if I had to say like my biggest takeaway, so I just spoiled in the first 10 minutes, my biggest takeaway of the whole day. No, I have a few others, but just, kind of creating something from there with that. Yeah, Lexi.
So when considering to host an event like you folks have done, is this idea of optics in the back of your mind? And what I mean is, we have an event at Arapahoe County this weekend that we just got kind of reapproved for on Monday with the new orders that had come out on last Friday. And we collectively made the decision to keep going with it. And I would be lying if I said we weren't kind of in the back of our mind saying, is this going to look good to the community? But I think at some point, right, that has to be considered when we're all kind of deciding to do events or not.
I'll toss in a comment on that because the Balloon Festival is in the very same situation. So we were getting a lot of pressure from the town, from the city of Steamboat Springs, who was feeling the economic fall out of this whole thing. And they were like, of everything that Steamboat Springs is, it's hot air balloons. I mean, that's the essence of that town, skiing and hot air balloons. And if you take all of our visitors away, and then you take our events away, what do we got here? You can't ski, we're in the summertime, but we don't even know what the ski season is going to look like. So you're taking away our essence, you're taking away our sense of community. And so we got a lot of pressure from the town, like, we need this. We need this balloon festival to happen somehow, some way. So we started doing all the iterations, and we were trying to figure out ground activities, and we were trying to figure out how to weave vendors in there and try to keep everybody safe. We thought about a grid situation and do like a tailgate type scenario. We were going to weave the vendors in amongst all the cars, and we tried working on all of these assets, but then we actually took a step back and we said, okay, if we have to do this event, we have to be fiscally responsible because we are a for-profit company. We're not a municipality, but we are doing it like we are a municipality. And two, we have to figure out a way that we can do it safely, but still get the essence of what it is that we're trying to do. So then we stepped back and we said, well, let's just start from the beginning and look at audience, right? Who is our audience? Who are we trying to speak to? Normally, the Steamboat Balloon Festival is all about the tourists. It's all about bringing as many damn people into town to see how much they can spend in town, right? That's normally the essence of it. But when the town was coming to us, they were not so concerned about the tourists. They were concerned about the health and mental well-being of the people in that community. So they came back to us and said, we need this for them. So then we said, okay, it's not a totally different audience. We still had some tourists there. But then we said, well, what are we doing this for? The tourists would probably be the ones that would be sitting underneath the balloons and having this ethereal experience, and they would want to be there up close and intimate. The locals don't care about that necessarily because they've been seeing these balloons coming through their town for years. They like that feel, they love that, that's part of their thing, but that wasn't the total crux of it. So we changed the focus of the event to just putting balloons in the air and saying, yes, we're still here. We're not going anywhere. There's no public event necessarily. We didn't do the balloon glow. We didn't do bands. We didn't do any of those things. But it was critical that we got those balloons in the air. And that's how we made that decision. Like, yes, we have to move forward because the town is pressuring us, but we had to completely rethink who our audience was. That's where we went back to basics. I don't know if that helps kind of address what you were saying. So it sounds like what you're doing is the right thing.
Well, I know, Lexi, you and, we've talked about it, Lindsay, we talked about this yesterday, is like the event that you're doing is bringing people together. And so I think you have to look and say if the purpose, and I think about it just like any of our other permits, you don't put tents next to a generator because the generator could catch on fire and the tent would catch on fire and that would kill people, right? We've always, as event planners, had rules and regulations to keep the residents and the attendees safe. And so I think what we just look at it, I try to look at it from that same perspective. Okay, the current requirement says you can't have people more than 6 feet. People have to be 6 feet away from each other. And Adams County just came out with, I think it's actually Tri-County Health, it's hashtag practice safe 6, which I totally love. It's practice safe 6, and there are 6 steps to practicing safe 6. One is 6 feet away from each other. One is wearing a mask. One is getting tested. One is, staying home if you're not sick. One is elderly, stay at home, or, immunocompromised, stay at home. So, they have this press, which is really, it's a cute, I laughed out loud. But, so you look at that and you go, well, how can I do the event inside of that requirement? And say, well, if we can't be 6 away, so it's like just thinking through that, just as we have done for any event for, we don't want people under 21 to drink alcohol at our event. And so using the requirements that they are, how can you make the event happen inside of that? And any place where you're in my mind, any place where you're really concerned that it's going to be an issue, it will be an issue on site. So change it in advance versus trying to fix it on site.
Totally.
Yeah, and in terms of optics, the one example that comes to my mind, I mentioned we did a virtual 5K. The in-person 5K has always been a very small event with only 200, 250 participants. So it would have been very possible for us to break that apart and do, different waves and still do an in-person event. But the client, the nonprofit that produces that, they are a medical, so it's Clinica Tepeyac, and they offer medical services to people, and they're fundamentally in the healthcare industry. And so for them, it was they didn't want to consider a different method of making it work. They just wanted, because they're in the medical field, to just say, nope, everybody needs to continue to stay home, stay apart. So sometimes it's who's coming, who's producing it. Those are all pieces of the puzzle. And I think, where we're at right now, there's no single view on, health measures and wearing masks and not wearing masks and staying home and not. And so if your audience feels comfortable coming, then embrace them. If your audience gives you some feedback that is a little bit negative, I think that it's okay to respectfully respond and say, absolutely understand, we struggled with the decision, and just be honest with it. Because it is a struggle. Every piece of this is.
Mm-hmm.
And when you did that, so you did it online, 250 in person. How did attendance end up being online?
About 30.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
And it's great that you say that, actually, because I was like hoping you were going to say 30, because all the stuff we did online was like in person 12,000, online 8. So if you'd done like 7,000, I'd be like, oh, I did something terribly wrong. So
Right.
What have
Right.
you found? What have you found in terms of online? Moving to online, what's been successful versus what's not been successful?
So with we've done a couple of other fundraisers that have been virtual. We've done 3. And really, it depends on the donor base and the fact that both of the galas have a really strong donor base, and they have a strong, desire to support the organization. And so the turnout was good. Certainly not what it would be, but for one of the nonprofits, it was in the $200,000 range of funds raised, and the other one was $300,000. Closer to 350. So phenomenal results, not what they would have done in person, but still well worth the effort.
Were the expenses lower for the event?
Were they what?
Were the expenses lower for planning the event being online, or not really?
Yes, definitely, because then you don't have the venue, food and beverage piece of it as the predominant cost.
Right. Very good. Lexi, did that answer your question? Okay, great. So I know that we've talked about this. It's come up a couple of times. How do you create plan A, plan B, plan C, and how do you keep motivated for doing that, and what is the process there? And so I commented earlier today, that's like my least favorite part, and I can do it, but it's just at some point it's just depressing. So it's a waste of paper and brain cells, I think, for me anyway. But is there anybody that either enjoys it, or by doing multiple plans, either required by a client or required by your management, that it's turned out successful? Like by doing that planning, then you've created this opportunity that you wouldn't have seen otherwise.
I can actually speak to that, and yes. And here is the reason why I say yes. It does get daunting after a while, but what I am kind of taking this whole COVID situation, when I first started with the company that I'm with, I was overwhelmed because I have such a huge territory, and I had 43 events on my slate of events for the year, and I just started with this company, and I was like, oh, and I felt like I was always doing this. So then when COVID hit, it sort of slowed me down, it slowed all my publishers down, it slowed our management down, and in the reimagining process, new cool things came out of that process. And no, I wasn't able to do exactly what I wanted, when I wanted, and how I wanted to do it. I mean, we thought back in April that virtual was going to be the solution. And then everybody was doing virtual because it's free. I mean, it's virtually free. And so everybody was doing virtual, and then you couldn't monetize it. So then we were like, okay, new drawing board. So we were trying to kind of reiterate and reimagine and rethink. And what came out of that process, I felt was really exciting. I have another event that's coming up in the spring, Westco Expo. And normally it's just an outdoor sportsman's expo, hunting, fishing, biking, all the outdoor things. And it was just vendors, and we had an education stage and a couple of activities within the event. But then now that this whole COVID thing has hit, we were like, okay, well, we got to keep these sponsors engaged. They've already paid for it, paid to be a part of the event. And we were going to postpone it the first time to September. Then that didn't work. So then we had to postpone it again. So how do we keep that conversation going? How do we engage our clients as well as engage our attendees and our exhibitors and that sort of thing? So we started doing a webinar series, and we did a webinar series every month all summer long. It died off after September, but we had different topics. Like spring, we talked about, in April, we talked about fly fishing and where to go. Those are all things you can do on your own in a COVID pandemic. You know, hunting. You can go hunting right now. The wolf repopulation concept, huge topic in the hunting world. So we engaged a conversation with the wolf repopulation. And it just kept that conversation going, and it kept that brand identity for our sponsors. But what was really cool about that now is that now we have that platform that kind of got built over the COVID season. But then now when we get ready to go into our live season, we've got that in partnership with what we're already doing live. So I found it to be really exciting because now we're entering a world. I mean, my mom never did video conferencing, and now she video conferences all the time, and she's in her late 60s, early 70s. So I think we have a new population of people, and to me, I find that exciting. I really do. So I don't know if that answers that question, but
Sure.
and I'm really bad at talking in microphones, sorry.
Well, luckily the volume goes up and down on their end, so you're right.
I know, thanks, guys.
Yeah. Anything else to add from either?
Again, you know, just different situation, municipality-wise. We do have the Armory Performing Arts Center. And so typically this venue can hold roughly 300 people for a show. And it is my manager, who oversees events, but also Downtown Initiative, but also this Performing Arts Center. And so they have taken their concerts virtual, right? Which, like you said, a lot of people did. But it has been cool, and it has been successful for them. They just had a group there on Friday last week, and I think overall it's only like a 1-hour show. And I think overall they had about over 400 viewers come and pop in and off. So that's kind of neat, because I think that they're starting to gain some new awareness from people, right? People that may not have known what the Armory Performing Arts Center was, or where it was, or what they can do there. And so I think that they're succeeding with that. Our Art in the Park, which is from our Arts and Cultural Division, they found this really cool platform to hold their Art in the Park event. So it, honestly, when you click into it, it looks like a video game. And you can click in, and they have downloaded all of the artwork from all of these artists, and you can go in and click on the art. You can even purchase it if you want to. So that's kind of cool too. I think it is reaching, I think it has the potential to reach more people through online or virtual than maybe it wouldn't have normally.
Right, great.
I'm with you. I really dislike plans B, C, D. And that's because our company is on a contract basis. And so if we spend 5 hours or 500 hours, we're still going to get paid the same. And so with some of the clients where we're planning and replanning and replanning and or they want to know, well, what's the cost difference if we do this versus if we do this? And so the lack of ability to just, repeat success and build on it, it was exhausting. Right. And so, yes, there's definitely things that have risen out of that, of great new opportunities and great things to carry forward. But I wouldn't do it again.
Right.
Very honest.
Yeah, exactly. I wouldn't say that I don't. Obviously, I have to do some planning and thinking about how to use it. And so I, for me at least, it's to answer my own question, other than I don't like it, which is not a very professional answer, by the way, is what can what can we gain from this? And I think we started with, well, what's the concept we already have for our event? And more so, who are the partners involved? Like for our food truck carnival, which we have in May, usually has, last year we had 87 food trucks. And so we weren't able to offer food, with those food trucks, we're not getting that revenue. So that then became, how can we get those folks involved that they can make some revenue? They're not going to make the same than they would have a food truck that has, X number of people a day, but how can we get those out? So that's where the food truck grab and go started. We needed a way to disseminate. So our council and our communications office really wanted to disseminate, and it was the way we use our CARES Act funding, which I thought was really cool. It was not my idea. So, kudos to the team for coming up with this. John was his name, who came up with, hey, let's just go to area restaurants in Northglenn and use our CARES Act funding to buy food from restaurants. So we bought $25 gift cards, 75 $25 gift cards from 35 different restaurants in Northglenn. And we paid it, out, and we use our CARES Act funding, and then we built bags, all the bags full of supplies before July 4th. And so we put in the $25 gift card, and we put in, things that kids could do as a group. So a deck of cards, a Frisbee, a jump rope, tattoos. I can't remember the other things. Those were the bigger items. And then this $25 gift card. And then we needed a way to get it out. So we invited, and we went local. So Northglenn is only 38,000 residents, broken up by 4 wards. And so we put trucks in all 4 wards. So just 2 trucks a night, but we did it for 3 nights. And then we stuffed 4,000 bags. And we gave out 2,500 bags that way. And then on our cool car cruise, because you couldn't do parades, but you could do cruises. So we gathered on July 4th, a cool car cruise. So it's basically taking what we already had, which we have a car show on July 4th, calling our car show guys and gals and saying, hey, would you be willing to drive down the street in your car? And so we drove down, we did 4 miles in Northglenn, a mile in each ward. And then people walked by and gave out the bags that we were giving out. So we gave out 1,500 more bags while walking down the street. And every resident that received a bag with a $25 gift card and other swag in it was like, this is so cool. And that's what we found across the whole summer is anybody who came to any event was like, hey, I can't believe you're doing something, anything. But also, normally the big events for Northglenn are in one park. And lady was like, I've lived in Northglenn 43 years. I've never had an event in this park. It's always sports. And because sports aren't happening this year, you're doing events in this park, and this is so cool. I hope you keep doing this in years in the future. And, council heard that, and so hopefully we'll get the funding and the opportunity to go back in those local communities and those individual parks. So one of the questions that I heard in just what was said before was in terms of sponsorship and revenue. And I know, Krista, you did a great presentation just before lunch about sponsorship and building and having sponsorship packets. But just for the group, I'd love to hear, because I've not had the experience maybe that you had. Most of our sponsors either have literally dropped off, or there are a lot of marketing companies that then they don't have funds. We've returned some money, which we were fine to do. But it's really hard to keep people engaged when they're not clear about how much revenue they're going to make. And so I'd love to hear just ideas about primarily successes, what we were able to do. We're always already challenged. So, if you can just focus on successes around sponsorship or things that you've seen or things that, that would be helpful to the audience.
Well, I would say as far as sponsorships are concerned, in my opinion, I think it's about this year and up until we can actually start doing live events, it's about keeping the conversation going with your sponsors. I mean, yes, you may have to give some money back, or yes, they may not sponsor right away, or, funding is really thin, or all of the things that they keep saying to you. You can't take that as a daunting no. Do you know what I mean? Don't let it take the wind out of your sails. Keep the conversation going with those folks. They're struggling as much as we are struggling. We're probably struggling worse than they are. But if we can empathize with what's going on in their business and their marketing world, and you can figure out a way to keep them imping along with you, eventually people, because we're a communal nature, will get back together and we'll do live events. It's gonna happen, and people are starved for it. And I think once the veil of this crap lifts off, we're going to get boomed. We're going to get bombarded. And if we have those partners in place, if we're creating those relationships now, they will stick with us in the future. Vectra Bank stuck with us with the Steamboat Hot Air Balloon Festival and really were the reason that we were able to do what we did. We saved money. We actually came out in the green on that event, if you can even believe it. But they basically said, look, we want to stick with you. We want to be a long-term partner for this event. We don't want anybody else to swoop in and be the presenting sponsor of this event. So you're still planning on doing it. We're going to hang with you, keep the money. We'll find some new ways to activate them, get their brand out there. But they stuck with us. And their biggest thing was, we don't want to be identified with anything that's going to be unsafe. And that was the other reason why we made the decision to just throw balloons in the air and not do anything on the ground. Because our title sponsor said, it's kind of freaking us out. And we said, whatever you say, we're not going to do anything. So we just threw some balloons in the air, and it was wonderful. And it really met every bit of their expectation. And they honestly walked away getting more respect for having stuck with us than by bailing. So I don't know. I think keep the conversation alive.
I think it's a
with
great
your
example
sponsors.
of, having a good, partnership. So much is about community gathering and support. So that's great. Others? Renee?
I think one of our bigger challenges was, as the marketplace did get flooded with virtual events, I know we've all watched really horrible virtual events. Or maybe just me. But so then as the summer went along, it got harder and harder to get people to sponsor virtual events, because they're like, well, we've already sponsored virtual events. It doesn't do anything for us. So I think it's going to take really telling the story of, okay, here's what we were able to do and what we were able to accomplish. And now take that information back out, as we look forward to the next set of events and say, okay, this is what we were able to accomplish. Bless you. And so I think a lot of it is just a little bit of that unknown for the sponsor to know if they're going to see a benefit from it. And then also the timing is really interesting, because the sponsors need the information about sponsorship far in advance, just like they always have. But they're not possibly
we don't
going
know
to,
what the hell we're doing right now.
Right,
so.
we don't exactly know what we're doing. So we're going to put together some kind of packet and say, well, we're going to, let you sponsor something. But, still, as you're saying, still keep in contact, still keep the conversation going, and expect that you might not get a yes until 2 weeks before the event, where they're like, okay, we're in, we'll do it. Which is nerve-wracking, but because things are changing so quickly in every different industry, I've found that you just have to be patient and be ready for whatever comes.
I actually will say, one of the things that I also learned, and not that I didn't know this, because I did, but I'm putting more emphasis on it now, is impressions. Do you know what I mean? Touch points. So for a consumer to go out and purchase a product, if you show them an ad on TV, that's one touch point. And then they hear about it on radio, that's another touch point. And if they see it in social media, that's another touch point. And they say, in general, for a consumer to purchase something, it takes up to 7 touch points before they're actually going to engage in making that action. They'll say it and go, I might buy that. Oh, wait. I like that kind of feature within that, and then they might actually look up the website. Then for them to click through and actually engage even further. So what you're doing is you're doing that building thing. And so what I feel like with events and sponsors, it's kind of the same thing. So instead of creating a sponsorship around a one-day event, like here's all your apples into this one basket, what I feel like COVID did is it's allowing us the opportunity to spread that basket out over a longer period of time. So like John was talking about Pride Fest, right? And he talked about a bunch of different elements that were involved in Pride Fest over the course of the actual event weekend. But then what he's doing, which I think is totally brilliant, and we're actually doing some of those things as well, is he's spreading that conversation out over the whole year. He's like, we start with the event, we do it, we finish it, take a breather, and then we start again 2 weeks later, planning for the following year. Engage your sponsors during that period of time, during that planning. Do a little virtual thing here and there, and get those data touch points, because that data, I can tell you right now, is going to sell way better in addition to that experiential marketing piece at the live event. So I feel like the virtual, even though you may have smaller numbers, can grow and grow and grow exponentially over the course of time if you're keeping that conversation alive. If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's added value. It's just added value to their sponsorship. And oh my gosh, then they've got a full year's worth of marketing. And then if you can get them in a multi-year contract, that's the sweet spot.
And
Just
then
saying.
Also, particularly if you have a limited capacity to your event. And so in the past, you could only have 1,000 people. And now by taking it virtually, you can have more. So that also was a successful selling point a couple of times.
Great. Well, I've just been told we have about 5 minutes left, so I wanted to check and see, what are the biggest takeaways we've had from the summer? Anything that's just like that you haven't already said now, anything that you'd love to?
I mean, as people in the event industry, flexibility, right? We know that already. We do that all of the time, but it's even more necessary now. I think, more of us should put pride aside and look at what our neighbors are doing, right? You guys are doing awesome events and great ideas. And, I told you guys when I got up here, there was an email that went out prior to this panel that said, what events have you done? And you had a list, and you had a list, and you had a list. And I was like, oh, man, look at people are doing stuff, right? But I don't, I think we should put pride aside and say, hey, I think it's really cool, this event that our neighbors are doing. Is there a way that we can somehow make something like that work for our community? I think that that's going to be key in going forward for us.
Great. Yeah. I have something to add, but would either of you like to respond?
My mantra for the whole year has been objects in motion stay in motion. And so a lot of things that might, we did a virtual 5K for 30 people, which doesn't necessarily fall into the category of successful. However, it's just whatever we all can do to just keep going and keep moving forward. That's what's going to get us through.
Well, one of the things I would say at least for Northglenn, and we're, community different than the other groups maybe we're all the same. We're probably all the same, is people do want to be out there and they're excited to be out. And so it's how can you, one of the things we did in August, and our residents would have done it, had to go for the rest of the year forever, is just so on the same night we had 4 concerts in 4 different parks with 2 food trucks in each park. And we didn't self-manage a lot. We had one sign that said social distance yourself, and that was it. And the performers brought out their own sound system, and they were so excited to play. And, and we had the food trucks, and that was it. I mean, it wasn't a ton. But by going to 4 communities on the same night, we were able to engage a larger audience beyond the 175 as a maximum. It was 800 people a night, or do the math better than I just did, 700 people a night that were really enjoying it, and then we were doing it once a week. So we did 16 events in August that we wouldn't have done otherwise. Actually 17, because we also did a Magic Fest in August as well. And I know this is beyond the one thing that I said we should do, but I will say for Magic, we had people come in timed entry. We had 20 people per entry point, and there were 5 stages. And so they would go to stage 1, then stage 2, stage 3, stage 4, stage 5, and they were out. But because we had 20 people coming in each time slot, we never had over the 175. We only saw 400 people during the course of the day, but the 400 people that saw it really enjoyed it. And for the performers, it wasn't any harder than what we've done in the past, because Magic is best seen in small groups. The only challenge was this, having here and then the performer being 25 feet away from the stage, and following that guideline was not as well received by magicians who are, focusing on close-up magic. It's hard to see a deck of cards from 25 feet out. But, it worked, and people really enjoyed it. So, just kind of keeping our minds alive and focusing. So I think Renee.
I'll throw one last little comment too, and this is me putting on my CFEA board member hat. One of the takeaways that I got out of this that I think is a really great byproduct of all this COVID stuff is the fact that we're all communicating together. When I was in Steamboat, had to get put on all these committees. I mean, I was on so many dang committees up there to try and figure out what to do. But we were all in that same boat. We were all trying to just row to shore. How are we going to do this? How are we going to do this? And that collaborative effort was really, really wonderful. We learned so much from each other by just talking to each other and sharing and exploring new ideas, because we all had to start from scratch. We all had to do that. It wasn't like just one event coordinator had to do it. We all had to do it. Right. And our sponsors had to rethink things, and everybody had to rethink things, you know? Yeah. So I think that takeaway from the CFEA standpoint is don't let the conversation end after today. You know, let's all, the board I know after this is sharing all of our virtual viewers and all of our in-person attendees and all the speakers and everything. Let's keep having conversations about what are you doing? How are you doing it? How did you handle this? Where did, you know, we're not in competition with each other. We are nothing but brothers and sisters in this world. So let's just keep talking about events.
I request we bring back the virtual happy
it will
hours. We're
come
all
back.
drinking from
They
our
will
homes.
come back, but we got to be ready.
We can
have to
hang
be
out and
ready.
play bingo while drinking a beer from our living room couch. There's nothing wrong with that. That is all part of the work. Did you want to add anything else, Renee? All right. It sounds like we're at end of time. Thank you so much for coming and joining us, both in person and online. Gigantic audience online for us today. So thank you so much. Have a great day.